happy Father's Day to all the fathers and the fathers-to-be. Thank you, thank you. And my boys gave me a card this morning. And it says, how to mow the lawn. Have a child. Make that child mow the lawn. I honestly didn't mind mowing. I didn't mind. Your lawn, I would not want to mow. That's a big lawn. Okay, then I would want to ride the lawn. I never had a problem with mowing the lawn, other than the inconvenience of it. Like you got 35 different things on the lawn. You got kids, you got to mow the backyard, keep it low. And I get that. But Sam, I taught him how to do that, and he did the front and the back, and now that he's working, Gabe started doing the front and back, and now all of a sudden the mow is not working so well. So Gabe's like, it's not working, I can't mow now, so I really shouldn't go out there because now it doesn't want to stay running. It's like, what are you talking? I go out there, boom, pulls it, starts right up. I'm like, it's working perfectly fine. Yeah, yeah, I know. Yes. There's a do not complain clause that comes along with that. So, I want to kind of start my story and what I want to say based on one of the first times I ever met Pastor Tim. Pastor Tim. Irene brought it up on Thursday service about reload, relaunch, and reset. I knew it was a third one. I had redirect. So back when it was before Pastor Tim, he got saved, went back home. North Carolina, South Carolina, where was it? North Carolina. Doing everything he was doing with that local church and everything else like that, and decided he was going to, wait until God was going to send him up here, and God sent him up here. So we're at Jennifer Bryan's house back when he lived in South Hadley, and up comes this U-Haul. At the back of the U-Haul, you open it up, and it's nothing but just boxes that say reload, 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 shells, reload. And I'm like, all right, definitely a Southern boy. I started to think about what reloading was. Reloading, you have to be empty to reload something. You go to Dunkin' Donuts, you swipe that card for the last time, it's empty. Technically, you still have it. There's nothing on it that says that it's empty. There's nothing on it that tells you how much it is. But technically, it's empty. So if you want to go back and re-swipe it, you can reload it for whatever amount that you want. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. When it comes to calibers and ammo, it doesn't work like that. So I'm going to take and see if I can overly spiritualize the effects of reloading when it comes to the principles of God. How's that sound? Okay. I am going to start with, Kelly and I were having a conversation the other day, and we were trying to remember or see if we could understand what it means to be sent. And she's asked me, I said, well, the easiest way I can explain it is from a principle of God, a calling on God, pastor, evangelist, teacher, whatever that calling is, when God sends you, that's technically you're leaving one place and going to another. So you're sent, but you can't be sent to someplace without coming from someplace. You have to start someplace first. So when you start someplace first, that's your foundation. Okay? If the foundation that we have is built on sandy ground, we know it's not going to last. There'll be no longevity to it. There'll be no length to it. There could be some fruit in the beginning, but it doesn't last because there's no good foundation. There's no good soil. There's no good anything that goes along with having a good lawn. Don't ask me about lawns because I don't have a nice lawn. I live on Sandy Hill, and it literally is. You water that lawn, and 5 minutes later, that water went straight through. It's just sand. It just goes right through. So in order for me to do something, I have to take that whole top level off, bring all good loam in there, spread that all out, nutrients, get your chemicals going, get your lime going, get all that stuff going. We're talking about foundations now. Get all that stuff going, then you got to put the seed down. And if you put the seed down with no water, it's not going to grow. If you put the seed down with just a little bit of water, it's not going to grow fast. If you put the wrong seed down in the wrong season, it's technically going to sprout a little bit, but there'll be no longevity to it. There'll be no length to it. It could burn out once it starts to get to the heat of the day. So there's a lot of things that come along when it comes to foundation. So I was trying to think of I was trying to think of somebody that was sent, like from Christ Life Fellowship. We're trying to think, this was before me, Leon and Sancha. I know they were part of this church a long, long time ago. I was trying to remember things like that, situations like that about somebody being sent. So I really didn't have a clear understanding of saying, how? I didn't have an example saying, oh, do you remember so-and-so and so-and-so? Well, they were sent to X in order to start a church there, or sent over here to do home missions over there and build themselves a church over there. So pastor was sent from Michigan, sent here, that's sent. That's the example that I can have. So I was praying about it this morning. I came across probably one of the best, not talked about the most, Bible stories is the book of Jonah. Listen to this. And now we were just talking about it yesterday. It says, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, go. Is there any misunderstanding in the midst of that? It is just go. We know he was supposed to go someplace, and we pretty much all know the story. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away. God said, go, and Jonah chose this direction. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed far for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed to Tarshish and to flee from the Lord. But we all think we can. But hi, Sister Kara. Holy cow, I didn't even recognize her. Sorry, I got distracted. Now everybody's got to look. Okay. You look very nice. Good. Okay, anyways. That's my pumpkin bread lady right there, so. Yeah, that's true, that's true. She'll throw nuts in the next one, and she knows I don't like that. All right, anyways. All right, so God said go, and he went the opposite direction. He went to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break it up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to their own God. Now, there's a whole other message in that right there. I just want to kind of like pick out what Jonah did, because we're going to get to reload in just a second. And each one cried out to their own God. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten up the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he laid down and to fall into a deep sleep. Now, I find it amazing that I feel like a lot of sailors can sleep on a boat. I went on a small yacht boat, Disney, and I got seasick in the first night. I was talking to Kelly yesterday. I was like, you know what? I want to go deep sea fishing. I said, I should take the boys deep sea fishing. Yeah. And Kelly just laughed at me like, did you not know sensitive boy? He pukes at the sight of anything, and you're going to put him on a ship? All right, so forget that idea. Yeah. So, Jesus went to sleep in the bottom of the boat. Jonah went to sleep in the bottom of the boat. Jonah had gone below the deck, and the captain came down and said, how can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us. First thing that tells me is the other gods weren't working. Because if everything was settled and everything was going well, they would not have gone there and say, hey, our gods aren't working apparently. Do you think you can summon your God? Because apparently ours isn't listening, or there is no God. Let's just leave it at that. Or they're not strong enough, or they're not capable to stop winds like my God can. Let's call on your God to see if you can, because ours isn't working. Get up and take notice, so that we will not perish. Then the sailors said to one another, come, let us cast lots to find out who was responsible for this calamity. They cast lots, and it fell on Jonah. Now, I found out, if you look around the room right now, let's say there's 30, 35 people in the room. Casting lots is putting that short stick inside of all of the long sticks, kind of thing like that. Same principle. If one person was doing something wrong that caused everything to happen inside that ship, and the one person picks the short stick, and it just so happened to be Jonah that was causing the calamity because God brought it, we know that. What are the chances out of 35 people that Jonah gets the short stick? I found that very odd. Could you imagine if Jonah knew it was his fault, which I think he was putting the pieces together, and Joe Schmo next to him pulled the short stick, and Jonah just went, I say we throw him over. I don't know what his problem is. He brought this calamity on us. Let's just chuck him over and just get him over with. Because Jonah knows inside, you're like, I know this is my fault. I know I'm going in the wrong direction. I know I should be changing. I know I should be trusting God. I know God said this and I decided this. See that inner turmoil inside of us all the time that happens right between our ears all the time? Because I don't think we have a problem with our heart, because I know God knows our heart. And I think we know our heart. We're like, I know what I'm supposed to be. But the head comes into play. Pride comes into play. Anything between our ears, like, well, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? So, how can you sleep? Then the sailors drew lots. They asked them, tell us who was responsible for making all of this trouble for all of us. Sometimes that one calamity in one person's life can affect so much things. Just in a spiritual house, it can make a difference. Just in your own natural house, it can make a difference. I think of the sin of Achan. God told them to do a certain thing. They ended up doing the opposite of that and trying to hide that, and it brought all that calamity on top of everything. That's just... And now that's another. We're going to stick with Jonah for today. All right. So, tell us, where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? He answered, I am Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. That's another message right there. Made the sea and the land. This terrified them all. What have you done? What could you have possibly done that caused so much violent storm to come your way that it's going to affect all of us? Now, if you were in a town, something happened, You can leave the town and you can go in different directions on land to get away from the center of the calamity, the problem, the issue, the storm, whatever it is. When you're in a boat, there ain't going anywhere. So maybe the rule should have been, maybe I shouldn't run from God by going in a boat. Maybe I should just run from God. No, I'm saying, travel. But God has a way of doing all of that stuff too. This terrified them all. What have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down? Pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know this is my fault and that this great storm has come upon you. Instead, the men did their best to row back to the land, tried to handle it on their own. God knows we've never done anything like that. Instead of just repenting, I'll try and fix it. I'll try and make up. I'll try and do penance, throw a couple of Hail Marys in there and a couple of, whatever you need to do to kind of. I was trying to go with that, and my Catholic part wasn't coming back up to me. But that's how I grew up, was my mom and my dad had that same mentality. No matter what you do, you can make up for it by doing something else better. You can make up for doing this not the best, or doing something wrong over here by making up by doing something else better over here. And I don't think that's a wrong. I think that mentality can get you into trouble, because then we think every time we do something wrong, all we have to do is a couple of good things. Okay? And I don't think there's a philosophy behind that. I don't think there's any right or wrong behind that, but I think if you can't do certain things and expect washing somebody's car for free is going to get you out of it. All right? I think there is a certain amount of what they call penance that comes along with whatever you've done. If you're breaking the law, you go to jail. Leave that one alone. Instead, the men did their own to try and row back to the land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried to the Lord, "O Lord, please do not let us die." And I found it, when I read that this morning, they were all praying to their own gods. And now it says, they all prayed to the Lord. So did something happen in the midst of that boat that all of a sudden they realized their God wasn't working, so let's trust Jonah's God, or Jonah's Lord, because now it says they all prayed to the Lord. Before it was prayed to their own gods. Then they cried to the Lord, "O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life, but not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, O Lord, have done as you have pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. Could you imagine a storm stopping within 5 minutes? Raging waves and crest upon crest, and knocking over. You throw one man over, and within 5 minutes, I'm not saying it was 5 minutes, could you imagine it would be like, all of a sudden be like, what in the world? How could you not realize that there was a God? How could you question that? How could you say, that was happenstance or coincidence or anything like that? And we know there's no coincidences, God. We know that the righteous steps are ordered of the Lord. We know that. Even when we're going in the wrong direction. Thank you, Lord, that even in the wrong direction, God knows how many steps it's going to take to get back to the correct path. And that's where you have to trust the Lord on. All right. Do not hold us accountable for killing this man. Then they threw him, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was inside of the fish 3 days and 3 nights, and that's where I'm going to kind of jump into this whole reloading thing. A caliber or a shell that is fully done has a firing pin in the bottom, it's got a brass casing, and then it's got a copper tip pressed in. In the middle of all of that is a measured out portion of gunpowder. A very, 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 when used properly or improperly, if it's not done right. The part that got me the most was the measured part in the middle. The other part was how much pressure it takes to put that all together so that it works according to what it was meant to do. You can't do that, and you can't do this walk without pressure. And God knows Christ Life Fellowship's seen some pressure. But there's a measure in there, and there's a measure in here on purpose that God has purposely caused just enough of the measurement in there and just enough of that pressure to be put together in order for that bullet, casing, whatever you want to call it, to be used. I went with Brother Barry's house a couple of months ago. Was it a couple of months ago? A couple of months ago, we went up there to hang out at their house. Ashley, Matt, I brought my firearm. Chris brought his firearm. So he has a gun range in the back and like a big hay bale kind of thing. So the reason I'm saying all of this is because there's different calibers to everything that comes to ammo. And I'm not an expert on it. There's a certain amount of ammo that can be used called a BB. There's no casing to it. It's a round ball bearing, and it's shot using air. Compressed air, CO, shot out. It'll probably puncture your arm, but that's about all it's going to do. It's not going to stop you in the tracks. A pellet gun is the same thing. It's shot with air. Okay? Once you get into 380, 38 special, 45 caliber, 50 caliber, all of those casings are all measured differently, but each one has a different purpose. You don't need a 50 caliber to protect your home. You don't need an AK-47. I had one of the police officers, I did his pictures at my studio, so we're inside of there, and he knew I just got my license to carry, and he was like, you need an AR. I'm like, I don't even know what an AR is. He goes, assault rifle. I was like, what in the world do we need an assault rifle for? So I got a wife and 2 kids and a cape. Am I like protecting Fort Knox? What do I? He goes, no. He goes, you probably can't get one anyways because they're going to become illegal and blah, blah, blah. But the joke was, with the proper permit, you have access to multiple avenues of firearms. Once you're in this class, you're allowed to go get any kind of gun that you want that is legal to purchase. Talk about reloading. In the process of all of this, listen to and you guys know me, you know my synonyms. So caliber is a diameter of something circular or a section, especially that is the inside of a tube. Now, we do some firearm stuff, gun drills and things like that, so we do tools that hone out the inside of a barrel for Colt and things like that. Some of the tools that I make, if you've ever held a handgun, there's a knurl. It's called a knurl. That grip that's on there, it's like almost like a prickly kind of thing that's on the handle of itself. Well, we make the tools that cut that pattern that's inside of there. So we do a couple of slides and things like that. So in the process of all of that, making the manufacturing part of it, you need a solely separate entity to make the bullets part of it. So you have gun manufacturers that make the handguns, rifles, things like that, and you've got the other people that make the bullets and things like that. So the diameter of a bore of a gun is taken into unit of measurement, capacity, and competence and ability, a degree or a measure of excellence. If it is not done properly, it will misfire, and that's what I was going with Brother Barry. He had some old ammo in his 22 that was not firing. So, point, shoot, casing comes out, but the whole bullet went out with it, even the tip, even the head, it didn't go all the way out. It was bad ammo. So it was exploding, it was doing everything it was supposed to do, but nothing was coming out. So he cleaned his gun, did everything he had to do, and he just had a bad round of 22s. So you could still have something packaged that looks like it's going to work and misfire and not work at all, for whatever reason. Here's the synonyms. Synonyms: ability, competence, quality, stature, talent, capability, dignity, distinction. It kind of sounds like a little bit of God's qualities inside of something like that. Because if he sends you, you're able, you've got the ability, you're competent, even though sometimes we don't think we are. There's a certain amount of stature that comes along with what God sends you to do. The other thing I found interesting is you can only reload with the same caliber. You cannot put a 9mm in a .380. It's a completely different shape, size, and everything. So that casing is meant to do this and to go in this direction. This casing is meant to go in this direction. So if we start looking at this as individuals, because in the midst of this, when Jonah got spit up onto Nineveh, before that, he was in the belly for 3 days and 3 nights. But before that, he was running from God. So in the process of doing that, he got reloaded in another direction, because once he came out, he did what God called him to do. So there's the relaunch. And there's the relaunch, and there's the reloading part. You can't fit a 9mm in a .380. Okay? It's a completely different size. So what I'm called to do, only I can do. I'm called to do a certain thing. You're called to do a certain thing. You're called to do a certain thing. You can't fulfill what God called me to do. It might be similar. I tell my boys this all the time. I said, don't settle for the back seat. I said, God's called you to the front. I said, you might not feel this way now, but it is my job to prepare you that God has called you to the front. I said, don't settle for something in the back. I said, God's called you to be leaders and not followers. I said, you're in high school now, in college. Don't be that follower along with everybody else. You see something that's not right, you say something. I said, and I hate bullying. I think it's the worst. It gets me really, really upset when I think about and see, even we're watching a movie, something like that, and you say, and I know it's a movie, I know it's Hollywood, I get the kids picking on the little kid, but something inside of me just like, oh my God, because it, and I told my kids, I said, I will never, if you are defending yourself or you're defending somebody else, I got your back. I don't care what it is. I got your back. There's got to be a point in our lives where we stand up for what is right, because if not, we'll fall over for everything that happens. And God did not call you and myself to fall over to anything. He's called us to stand. He called us to be the caliber that I'm supposed to be. He called you to be the caliber that you're supposed to be in that chamber, to be sent to do what you were meant to do in your area and what I do in my area. That's it. Inside of what's called the magazine, inside the chamber, which is inside the handle, you can carry about 5 or 6, depending on the size of the gun. Bigger rifles have more ammunition inside of the thing. But once you get to the last one, the gun locks. That last bullet comes out and it locks. It locks open. So it lets you know there's no more bullets inside of the chamber. In the process of that, this is where the reloading happens. That magazine comes out. You've already got 5 more, 6 more, 7 more, whatever's inside of the chamber. Lock back inside of there. You rack that. You're ready to go again. There is a principle in God that if a righteous man falls, how many times? How many times are they supposed to get back up? We cannot be one and done. Oh my God, I had the worst year. Has anybody expected 2020 to go this direction? Ain't nobody expected this. And then when the next thing happened, you're like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. And then when the next thing happened, oh my God, I didn't expect that. So what has God called us to do in the midst of all of this that's happening in the world? He's called you to do one thing, and that's to be a light in the midst of a dark place. All of those people have no direction, no hope. They don't know what they're doing. We came home from Quabbin yesterday, so we were coming through Ludlow. And as you come through Ludlow back home, down 21, the police station, fire department's on the left-hand side. They had the whole thing blocked off. Literally, military people standing out by the streets, cops, rifles like this, right in front of the police. The police station's up the street in Ludlow. And the fire department's on the left-hand side. So it's barricaded off with some cones and some stuff there, and 6 cops there. As you come to the lights, the police station is down the street over there. Protesters all across the streets over there, so they're blocking the road. And I think it was a legal pursuit because everything's blocked off. The police were just standing there. But they were prepared for anything. If you look at, there's a cop that can walk down the street and they're head on a swivel kind of thing like that. They're aware of their surroundings kind of thing like that. And then there's another, the demeanor changes. When there's a threat, the demeanor changes. The countenance changes, the face changes, everything changes, your stance changes, everything changes because now you're a little bit more of the, not aggressor, but you're a lot more defensive now. So now you're more aware of your situation, and we're still talking about reloading. So you're still standing there, now you're aware of your situation now, and this is how they're standing there, just like this. They're ready for whatever they needed to do. And their taser, you can always tell that they're carrying a taser because they're always a different color. It's always yellow or orange, and sometimes red. But they're always there. So you can see it, they're fluorescent. So you can see he's got that, he's got this, and all of a sudden you're standing here with an AK-47 or whatever they carry like this, and they're ready. They're ready for whatever. I would like to see more Christians stand at attention like that. Not with the intent that you're being the aggressor and you're ready to attack, but you're ready to make a defensive situation happen, that you're ready for whatever comes your way. Whatever the enemy has to throw at you, whatever happens in life, you're ready defensively, first and foremost, to be ready with the Word of God. And we're not talking about a military stance, somebody attacking you. I'm talking about when situations happen. Yeah, that's a great principle, and we can go in that direction. But here's what I'm saying. There's a fine line between being defensive stance, not talking about being defensive, and being aggressive. Because sometimes when you're aggressive, it comes off as being offensive. Now, you can turn more people away by you trying to be aggressive with the Word of God. You can turn more people away by trying to be a little bit more, hey, you need to do this, you need to stop doing this. You're turning more people away, kind of thing like that. And we know that we've been taught well. We've been taught well. So I'm done with the Jonah story. But there's a certain amount of gunpowder in a certain measure in each caliber that's in there. And if there's no firing pin, it's still going to look like a bullet, but it's not going to do anything because it has to be ignited from the bottom, from the chamber, from the firing pin in order to be sent to do what it's supposed to do. Okay? You will see, I was talking to Kelly about this yesterday. I said, I really feel like certain things are changing to the point where a lot more people are going to start saying, this is what I feel God wants me to do, so we're going to do it. That's a good thing. But I think there has to be a point where you feel like God is saying something to you, and you said it before the leadership of the church. Either to get the blessing or to get the direction to go forward like now is the time. And I think there's a lot of people, because I'm a very impatient person, so don't talk to me about patience. There's a lack of patience when it comes to being a Christian, because for some reason we feel like we got to go right now. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of, the word of the Lord was, go. He took it a long way. We know the story. He got spit up on Nineveh. We know the whole story about that. But he went in the opposite direction. There's a certain point where people are going to start saying, this is what I feel God's called me to do, or this is what I feel God's called us to do, so we're just going to go do it. Could you imagine if, now, again, that happens, but you can go too soon. And just because you went doesn't mean you were sent. We know that. There's a timing in God for everything. I was going to bring up Ecclesiastes today and go through there, a time for this, and 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 a time. And I'm reading through it. I was like, wow, this is real. And we ain't got time for that. I need this now. Example, go to Arby's or Dunkin' Donuts. When you come around that corner, if that line is more than 5 cars, will you stay? If you want it bad enough, that's a good answer. But it's a deterrent to see something that long. Say, oh my God. It's just a coffee. Or it's just lunch or whatever. And it is an inconvenience. TD Bank is another thing. You could be 75 cars back. And I get all of that. The insides are closed. But if you're going to sit there and murmur and complain the whole entire time, where's your peace? Where's your peace in the midst of the situation? That's a true measure of a good God quality, is patience. Forbearance, long-suffering, all those things are all fruits of the Spirit. Do we have those fruits of the Spirit on a daily basis? Guilty? No. You guys don't have to raise your hand. But the truth is, there's a portion of reloading that God is doing in this hour right now, that He's taking what He's already measured out for you and what He's already prepared for you, and here's the firing pin, and you put you inside the chamber, and whatever you're called to do, just do it. Don't try and do what I do. I won't try and do what you do. What you've been called to is different than what I've been called to. All of this stuff is different. But if we just say, I'd rather be doing that, how come that person gets to do that? Kelly and I would love a ministry in the Bahamas.
You can do that when I'm on route.
Okay. Yes. Seasonal. The point is, whatever you've been called to do, just do it. If we get caught up with your caliber size, I'm only a 38. I can't do what the 50 caliber does. I can't do that. You're not called to that. Just do what you've been called to do. Take what you have, bring it before the Lord, bring it before the leadership of the church, even if it's just, we're starting up the food bank thing again. Is that what it's called, the food bank? What's it called? What'd you call it? Food drive. We're starting up the food drive again. Be a caliber kind of a person and bring some food in. If we can start doing a lot more of the little things, we'll lose sight of what we have to do down the road. If we were to, and all of us know this, if I would have known what I had to go through 29 years ago, 30 years ago, God knows I would have taken a right or a left along the way to try and beat my way around to get, so I would have less hurt. I would have less problems. So I'm trying not to focus on my next 30 years. I'm just trying to focus on the next week. What can I do to prepare my kids to be ready for what God's called them to do? I lost my father on Father's Day. I was trying to think of the year. We were driving in the car, and I can't remember which year it was, but it was literally on Father's Day. I remember getting a phone call. I was sitting in my seat over there. I got the phone call, and I know if my brother calls me, it's an emergency, because he don't call me for nothing. You guys got any siblings like that too? Doesn't call me for nothing. Called me. I went outside the door, got the phone call, came back in, and I remember standing there on that side whispering in Pastor's ear what had happened, and he prayed for me, and then I went. And I'll never forget getting there. He was on life support, respiratory, he had the tube in, and he had to do not resuscitate, and they accidentally resuscitated him. Okay? First of all, illegal, they can't do that. So they waited for the two brothers to get there, my other two brothers and myself to get there. So we get there, we're all like, you know, if you take that out, you know if we take that out, and we're like, but he didn't want it in. So they ended up taking it out. And it was one of those moments that I'll never forget. I was on the right side of the bed. My older brother, Ray, was in the hall, and Stephen was at my left shoulder over there, and I was just holding my dad's hand. My dad was a good man. He was the best dad that he could be for who he was. I want to be better, and I think it's every father's desire to be better for their kids. Not that anything was bad, not that anything was no good. It's just my desire is I want to be better. A better dad, more consistent, there for them. I coached my boys' teams, soccer team, basketball teams. I was there for all of their sports. I'm proud of myself for doing all of that. So I got my dad's hand. My brother's at my left. And then, you know, a little while afterwards, you know, you hear that last breath kind of thing like that. And that was on Father's Day a couple of years ago. That was a hard day, and Father's Days are always hard as it is. Same thing with my mom, same situation. But the caliber of who you are, regardless of what size, don't try and be that 50 caliber, because that's got a bigger bang. That's got a bigger bang, bigger pop, more power, more emphasis, more attention comes along with something like that. But what if God's called you to be a BB? What if he's called you to be a 9mm? What if he's called you to be something closer to what you need to be just to be who you are? If you function in what you're supposed to function in, you'll go farther than somebody who's missed the mark. You'll always go farther. I said it last week, the same thing. You'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I would rather be known by my kids saying, you know what, he trusted God with everything that he did, and he was always there for us. And so with that being said, I know we've got the second bell coming on. Just be that caliber that you're supposed to be. Take that measure that you have. Allow the pressure of God to put everything together so that you can be used. Bottom line is God wants to use every single one of us to go outside of those doors and be what you're called to be outside those doors. This is where we come and get re-energized. This is where we gather as a family. This is where we get re-energized. We go back out the door. We go back out to the world. And like Pastor always said and Brother Varner always said, there's your mission field. There's your mission field. So I'm going to end on this. Nope, I already said it.